Resistance. It seems like an easy word to define, but in the real world, resistance happens in many different ways.
Physical resistance is just one of the ways of confronting a wrong. Others include political, cultural, and even spiritual resistance.
What does resistance mean to you? Where have you seen it? And why is it important for people to find the courage to resist?
So what resistance means to me is really strength and the courage to do what is right, even when it is not easy. I think especially when it is not easy.
Resistance means that you refuse to be compliant or passive when you become aware of an injustice.
Resistance to me looks like not accepting the rules and guidelines given to you by oppressive institutions.
I find resistance as a way of standing up for what's right.
To me, resistance is not giving in. It's not agreeing to what everyone around you is doing just because they're doing it. It's not complying for the sake of complying.
Today, we're going to hear testimony from people who found the courage to resist things that were wrong or unjust in their world.
We're also going to explore why resistance is rarely just a single spontaneous act, but rather a series of actions, a chain of resistance that unfolds in a variety of different but linked ways.
Welcome to this special USC Shoah Foundation and Discovery Education virtual field trip. The courage to act, forming a chain of resistance.
Hey everyone, I'm Celine.
And I'm Safia. Today, we're at USC Shoah Foundation headquarters in Los Angeles on the campus of the University of Southern California.
Safia and I are high school seniors in LA. We're also education emissaries at USC Shoah Foundation, where we help fellow students engage with survivor and eyewitness testimonies from the Holocaust and other atrocities, such as the Armenian and Cambodian genocides and the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda.
USC Shoah Foundation Visual History Archive has more than 55,000 testimonies. While they describe some of the bleakest moments in history, the testimonies also contain inspiring messages about the importance of love, hope, resilience, and resistance.
We're calling this virtual field trip The Courage to Act, forming a chain of resistance, because real change rarely happens after just a single act of resistance.
In fact, the phrase chain of resistance comes directly from a piece of testimony given to USC Shoah Foundation by Vlad Kamid, a member of the Jewish resistance in the 1943 Warsaw Ghetto uprising during the Holocaust.
When I look back, I think that the armed resistance was possible because it was an ethical, moral resistance going on in the ghetto before deportation. It didn't come suddenly. This was a chain leading to active resistance.
Throughout history, acts of resistance have sometimes been large outbursts, but more often are smaller acts that can be just as powerful. People who keep a secret journal, play traditional music, teach children a banned language, or quietly practice their religion.
Acts of resistance also can sometimes involve hundreds of thousands of people, sometimes a handful of people, and sometimes just a single person.
Let's meet Lilac, an inspiring 12th grader in Tioga County, Pennsylvania, who is almost single-handedly raising awareness of LGBTQIA issues in their community in a number of creative ways.
You don't have to be the biggest name in the world in order to effectively resist something. You don't have to be a group of people to resist something. It really just takes one person just willing to say, hey, I don't approve of this. Hi, my name is Lilac. I'm a 12th grader from Tioga County, Pennsylvania, and my pronouns are they, them. Tioga County is right along the New York border in uppermost Pennsylvania. It's very rural. I came out as non-binary officially when I was a sophomore in high school. It was kind of a scary experience because, nobody really knew me at the time. People knew the girl that I used to be, but that wasn't who I actually was. There was part of myself that finally had a name that really just had to show that they were there.
I remember this one when we went with...
I got into Girl Scouts when I was in first grade. It really benefited me a lot as a kid.
And then it would just pour this...
We got to test our problem-solving skills. We got to go places and do things we hadn't done. Splash Lagoon was the best trip ever. Ever since middle school, ever since 5th grade, it's been more service-focused because that's when the bronze, silver, and gold awards start. The Gold Award is basically the highest honor you can get as a Girl Scout because it shows that you have taken your time to really benefit the community. My Gold Award project is essentially to increase awareness and acceptance of the LGBTQ+ community in Tioga County. It was around the time I came out, and I realized that there were practically no resources for people like me in this county, and nobody really did anything about it. So the project started out by asking local businesses to put up a sticker with the logo of our local pride organization, Tioga County Pride. The stickers are a sign of support against bigotry. It's a beacon to practically anyone who belongs to a marginalized community, just to tell them they're safe and accepted. Here is the official...
We didn't want a business to just put up a sticker as a token effort. So the letter that Lilac wrote that went with the sticker said very clearly, this is what the sticker means, how we as a business do not discriminate against people for any reason.
I had to submit it to the official Girl Scout Council to get my Gold Award approved. With me not being female, I was worried that I'd get rejected, but the answer was a resounding yes. And that's when I learned that Girl Scouts now allows members of all genders. I went around to local businesses to display the stickers, and I basically just gave a whole spiel on what the mission of Tioga County Pride is and showing that they agree with our purpose by displaying the sticker. It was very scary. I didn't know what they would think. It was just like coming out. I didn't know what they'd think, and I was worried. I was kind of surprised that most of the businesses that we approached got a sticker, actually displayed it. I think the more I did it, the braver I got.
Lilac, is a normal kid, right? And a teenager. So they have a lot of the typical fears and insecurities that a teenager has. But when it is a cause that is important to them, when it is something that they feel is maybe a right, they can be quite fierce and quite formidable.
Whenever I walk through town and see a business with a sticker up, for everybody who has looked at it and sneered, there has been somebody who has looked at it with admiration, knowing that they or someone else is going to be welcome in this business. I feel that whatever you do, somebody is going to say no. Whatever difference you try to make, there is always going to be an opposing force. You'll always have critics, you'll always have somebody who doesn't approve of what you're doing. And I've just persisted by resisting and just taking on these initiatives anyway.
Thank you, Lilac, for sharing your story. You're not only brave, but also a wonderful example of individual resistance. The act of resisting can be contagious. When one person resists, others often follow. Small group resistance is a type of resistance where a handful of people, or even a few hundred people, unite to counter an oppressive situation. April 19th, 2023, marked the 80th anniversary of one of the most famous examples of small group resistance in history, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. For nearly 2 months in 1943, several hundred Jewish resistance fighters, including Vlad Kamid, managed to hold off Nazi German forces that were trying to liquidate the Jewish ghetto in Warsaw, Poland. An estimated 7,000 Jews died during the uprising. while nearly 50,000 others who survived it were eventually sent to concentration camps, where many also perished. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising may have been put down by Nazi German forces, but it inspired Jews in many other ghettos to also resist their oppressors. Most didn't have access to weapons, so they found the courage to act in a variety of other ways. Roman Kent was one of them. He survived with his brother for more than 4 years in the Jewish ghetto in Lodz, Poland. Roman died in 2019 at the age of 92. But because of the powerful testimony he gave to USC Shoah Foundation in 1996, we're still able to hear how he and a handful of other Jews resisted the Nazis. Helping us understand how Roman Kent's experience exemplifies small group resistance is Cheryl Ohayon, an educator at Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center in Israel. Cheryl works on Echoes and Reflections, an educational program by Yad Vashem, the Anti-Defamation League, and USC Shoah Foundation.
Today is April 29th, 1996. The survivor being interviewed is Roman Kent, born Roman Knieker. When were you born?
April 18th, 1929.
Roman Kent gave his testimony to USC Shoah Foundation 50 years after he was liberated, and yet his memories are crystal clear.
Was Lodz a big city?
Yes, Lodz was a big city. It was actually the second largest city in Poland. It had about 600,000 people before the war, and roughly speaking, there was maybe 200,000 Poles and about 200,000 Jews, and then a lot of Germans.
When the Germans got to Lodz, there were all kinds of measures against the Jews that gradually increased in severity, which is pretty much the story everywhere.
Slowly, we started to see the problems. The Jews have to wear an armband, the Jews have to wear a star, the Jews cannot be on the streets in the evening. And then, towards the end of '39, the order was given that everybody has to go to the ghetto.
Roman was a teenager when the ghetto was first established in Lodz. A ghetto is basically a confined area. And what the Germans did during the Holocaust was that they created these ghettos to isolate the Jews, to separate them from the rest of the population, and that had a lot to do with controlling them. Conditions in the Lodz ghetto were absolutely horrible. It is the ghetto with the largest rate of death from starvation in the entire Holocaust. 21% of the ghetto starved to death. Sadly, Roman's father was included in that category because he died from the side effects of being hungry and cold.
Where I worked in the ghetto, which we were showing some leather knapsacks for the soldiers.
Roman was put to work when he was in the ghetto, as were all of the children who were over 10 years old. Everyone had to work because if you didn't work for the Germans, there was no point in keeping you alive. His form of resistance, together with a lot of the other teenagers and youths who worked with him, was to have what he calls a slow down strike. In other words, if they were supposed to produce 10 of these leather things a day, they would work slowly and produce many fewer of these things.
We realized that the management would be afraid to do anything to us, because if they openly would say that, hey, you've got a slowdown strike, they would be punished by the Germans. So in a way we were playing them against the Germans, and we are saving our lives by very low production. Resistance does not have to be with a gun and a bullet. A resistance, when a mother gave a piece of bread to the child so that he could survive, it is a resistance. a teacher that was teaching the children in ghetto, it was resistance. Resistance was in the Lodz ghetto that we had symphony orchestra. This orchestra played and it was cold. But by playing in ghetto, they gave the people the will to live another day and another day and another day. Yes, it was maybe not legal, but it was a resistance.
A lot of people think that the Jews did not fight back during the Holocaust. First of all, it's the wrong question to ask. The question really should be, how was it possible for the Jews to fight back? The Jews were being starved, they were being crowded into ghettos, all of their liberties were being taken away from them, all of their rights. How could they have resisted? And we know that they did resist. We know that there was armed resistance in over 100 ghettos. In terms of spiritual and cultural resistance, there are just hundreds and thousands of examples.
It could be volumes to be said, but I think we have enough for today.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Cheryl Ochayan, Project Director at Yad Vashem for Echoes and Reflections, for helping us understand small group resistance through the testimony of Roman Kent. And thank you, Roman Kent, for providing testimony that helps counter the false narrative that Jewish men, women, and children did not resist during the Holocaust. The Echoes and Reflections website offers lesson plans and other dynamic classroom materials for teaching about the Holocaust at echoesandreflections.org. You can also view excerpts of other powerful testimonies from survivors like Roman Kent on the Discovery Education and USC Shoah Foundation website, teachingwithtestimony.com. We've now seen examples of individual and small group resistance. Next is large-scale resistance, which can involve thousands, tens of thousands, or even millions of people joining a chain of resistance. Recent large-scale protests include events like March for Our Lives, Black Lives Matter, and school strikes for climate. One of the most historic large-scale protests was the Civil Rights Movement, which unfolded primarily between 1954 and 1968 in the United States and continues to have impacts today. The Civil Rights Movement used a series of marches, protests, sit-ins, and other forms of civil disobedience to try to abolish racial segregation, discrimination, and disenfranchisement against Black Americans. Something that rose during the Civil Rights Movement were freedom schools, free alternative schools for Black Americans living in the South. One of the most noted was established in Mississippi during Freedom Summer in 1964. Today, an after-school program in Chicago models itself on the Mississippi Freedom School concept by helping young people build civic engagement, leadership, and large-scale resistance organizing skills. Let's learn more from two Chicago Freedom School activists, Santi and Shuja.
The word resistance means to go against. As a youth of color, we oftentimes find ourselves having to go against because a lot of the things that were set in place are here to resist us, and it's important to resist that to create a future for ourselves.
If you don't resist, nothing's gonna change. So resistance to me is knowing I deserve better, and I am willing to put myself at risk or a little bit in harm's way, and I will fight for that better. To me, Chicago Freedom School is like if we radically reimagined our perception of school.
A day at Chicago Freedom School would look like eating breakfast in the morning and then getting into a couple games, a couple icebreakers to get to know the community around you.
So when we think of Alex, we think what? Amazing.
And then getting into some intensive workshops to give the youth some kind of perspective and learn about things that are not taught in schools.
In school, you don't learn about how ugly the civil rights movement actually was. People died, people were beaten, or even a lifetime of living in a segregated state or a city.
I think a lot of what we do at Chicago Freedom School, one way or another, teaches some kind of a lesson that's important to creating movement work.
One of the things that trauma does for us is it robs us of our ability to see a future. So if you're gonna be an anchor, you have to practice anchoring.
When we come into the space, we get opportunities that we may not ever have had before, and creating bonds that necessarily wouldn't just happen.
What's most important, cherishing friends, focusing on family, neighbors and colleagues, and finding joy. I feel like a lot of schools don't really have much diversity, and I feel like being able to come here and learning about each other's shared experiences, it's a second family to me.
The Mississippi Freedom Schools is not necessarily a thing that's taught in school nowadays. This is what the framework of Chicago Freedom School is actually based in. The Mississippi Freedom Schools definitely were a form of resistance, getting voters registration for folks in the South that weren't provided the education in order to be able to vote and able to make change. I think it's important that Chicago Freedom School looks to the Mississippi Freedom Schools as a model. Doing revolutionary work nowadays, you're not starting from scratch. We're always learning from what's already been done. And I think also it's a way of honoring those that have sacrificed a lot in the past. The foundations and the values and fundamentals that we've had years ago still live within us because we know that it creates productive work and it creates productive education and be in community with one another. In order to educate, you really have to understand a piece of someone's struggle and understand what made it hard for them to be educated before. Revolutionary work is hard, and so having community and educating people that you actually know brings joy and brings a refreshing reminder of like why we do this work. Around the time where COVID was really striking and a lot of businesses were having like really strict COVID regulations that weren't really being reflected within our schools, there was a conversation between the Chicago Teachers Union and the mayor. They had a vote on what should be happening, should things go virtual. The conversation was totally over our head, and we had no say-so whatsoever, which we felt, of course, was not right. So we took it upon ourselves to create a group and give youth voices and kind of let other revolutionary youth know that, hey, there's a conversation now, and we're creating our own seat at the table.
We organized a citywide walkout.
And we had like almost 1,000 youth out there, all protesting.
We planned that in the span of a week. I had never felt so much like love and community before. The impact was massive.
At the end of the day, it was about COVID safety regulations, but it had a much bigger picture to it that students aren't taken seriously in serious conversations that affect them. And it created the movement effect of encouraging folks like, hey, even though you're a student, even though you're a youth, you have a voice.
If you are a student and you are curious about where to begin, I think reading is your first step, just to know the knowledge of the people who have come before you. The more you know, the more you're able to equip yourself with the tools to grow up as a person of color in a big city.
When we look at revolutionary work and movement history, a lot of times it's young people that are putting in the organizational work. Moving towards change and developing a world that is more inclusive of everyone, I think it's important to look at young people as a very significant part of that.
I love being in Chicago Freedom School because I feel like I do not have to be silenced. This is, I think, a safe space. When you go through hard moments, but you still have that community, you're able to keep going, you're able to keep pushing.
No matter how old or young you are, you can be an educator. Chicago Freedom School has gifted me with the skills that it takes to be an educator and be a revolutionary and create work that creates change in the future.
Thank you, Santi, Shuja, and Chicago Freedom School for helping us learn about your program and about large-scale resistance.
So far today, we've learned about the different forms of resistance. We met Lilac, a student in Tioga County, Pennsylvania, who is working as an individual to raise awareness of LGBTQIA rights.
We heard testimony from Roman Kent, and listen to Cheryl Ohayon from Echoes and Reflections explain how it exemplified small group resistance during the dire circumstances of the Holocaust. We also just learned about large-scale resistance from Santi and Shuja at Chicago Freedom School.
Recently, Safia and I convened a group of interns from USC Shoah Foundation to talk about what we've learned in this virtual field trip and explore why resistance is important.
Welcome, everyone. Let's all begin by introducing ourselves.
Hi, my name is Mia. I'm in the 10th grade and my pronouns are she, her.
My name is Andrew. I'm in the 9th grade and my pronouns are he, him.
Hi, I'm Asher. I use they pronouns. I'm a senior.
Hi, my name is Jason. I am in 11th grade and he, him for my pronouns.
So, what are some of the stories you've heard today that have had an impact on you?
So one of the stories that have had a really big impact on me was Roman Kent's. And what really resonated with me is how lots of children were forced to work in these big factories. And so they did a slowdown strike. And so instead of trying to meet the quota of going to 10 pouches a day and making 10 pouches, they only made 2. And using that small group resistance to not only help themselves, but to also help the people in the world that were also facing this kind of persecution.
One story that actually resonated with me was that of Lilac Story. They made these LGBTQ pride stickers. They went around to different businesses and asked them to put these stickers on these windows, and that was so empowering. They were able to foster this community of love, of pride for new people who were being welcomed into the county. So that's one story of an individual resistance that really stood out to me.
Yeah, when I think of Lilac and their smaller level resistance, it reminds me of the Chicago Freedom Schools, which were of course built on the Mississippi Freedom Schools of the 1960s. So the Chicago Freedom Schools continue that kind of tradition of helping people of color gain back some knowledge that they might not be getting from the school systems. I think that's a really powerful form of resistance.
Also regarding the Chicago Freedom Schools, when COVID-19 restrictions had to be implemented for the schools, the school boards made these decisions without the input of the students. But the student bodies of the public schools realized that they were the ones who were going to be impacted, and they decided that they needed to make a change. Over 1,000 students were gathered outside one of these administrative buildings and decided that change had to occur. And that's an example of large group resistance. And I feel like that was very powerful for me because large group resistance is what drives a lot of change.
So building on that, what are the forms of resistance that you guys heard about today that you didn't know before?
I mean, Roman Kent talked about cultural resistance. He talked about how in the ghettos, some people organized to make symphonies, and it really boosted morale and gave people hope. And just that is a really big form of resistance that not a lot of people think about. Just keeping your hope up and wanting to keep fighting encourages others to do the same.
So why do you all think resistance is important?
I think that trying to make a change, even if it's just you as an individual, you trying and putting something out there that other people might also agree with, but might not have the bravery or the ability to speak out on. I feel like doing that, standing up, and trying to make a difference can encourage other people who might be scared. Not everyone is able to do it, and someone needs to start it. And when someone does, they can make a really big change, even when it starts with just them.
Like marching to the beat of your own drum or to your own symphony orchestra that's playing and just staying true to yourself and being the upstander rather than like a bystander.
Yeah.
In the world, human nature is to do good. Everyone has that capability inside of them. And through resistance, when we all come together, through sheer might, we overcome those who are trying to do harm to others. And through that, we can help preserve justice and defend ourselves against falling back into injustice.
I think resistance is so important. It's maintaining your own identity, maintaining your ability to think, maintaining your ability to live freely, and to have your own thoughts and to be able to express your own thoughts in general. And I think it's extremely, extremely important to be able to maintain your identity. That way we have a diverse amount of perspectives, and that way everyone has a voice, everyone has power within their own society.
Yeah, going off of what Mia said, I feel like resistance doesn't only cause change, but it also empowers people who are oppressed, and it gives them a sense of their own self-identity and the fact that they have the power to make change if they try, and kind of like, I don't know, stops them from being pressed down so much by like these oppressive systems that are hanging over them, and allows them to take control of their own lives. Thank you to everyone who joined us here today. And also thank you to Lilac, Cheryl Ohayon, Shuja, and Santi for sharing their powerful stories.
On behalf of USC Shoah Foundation and Discovery Education, thanks for joining us.
I believe that it is so important to stand up for what's right, because we have the opportunity to change the lives of not just our friends and family and neighbors, but people all across the world.
I think it's important to have the courage to act because you can inspire so many others to do so.
I think it is important to stand up, not just for yourself, but for others.
Standing up for what's right could change someone's life for the better.
The most amazing accomplishments in history are because there was one person, or maybe a few, that stood up with their opinion, even when it was not the popular opinion, and said, no, this isn't right, and there's another way that we can do things.